All right, before we get underway, I obviously have some things to share with you, but I'm just kind of curious, and this includes everybody, OMs as well. Are you seeing any things in the current market that are cropping up that are making you scratch your head a little bit? Anything? This is a participation sport, by the way. Jill, you seeing anything crazy?
Nothing that's sticking other than interest rates are dropping. I see.
Yep, good news, right?
Yes.
And all the people that have been fading, all the practitioners who've been fading out of the market for 6 months, good for them. Let's encourage them to have a nice, quiet Christmas. I had one this morning. I'm not going to cover this today, but just as a teaser, these are the things I hope you guys will be looking for and share with me so we can cover these things. One of our agents called me and said, hey, we were supposed to close this morning at 7:30. I mean, a Monday morning closing at 7:30. Woohoo, that's the way to get the week started. And she said, my people aren't signing because they did their walkthrough on the house and there were three predominant things. And I'm going to ask you, so be thinking, I'm going to ask you guys how you would handle one or all three of these. They did their final walkthrough, and there's a fixture over in the bathroom over the toilet, just kind of thing you put towels on or whatever, and that was gone. And then there was a spot on the carpeting that they hadn't seen before. And then, the air duct from your dryer, sometimes they have to go, if you're on a basement level, you have to go up. And this one wasn't like the collapsible kind. This is the one that is just one solid piece of aluminum metal. And when they had removed the dryer, it was no longer attached and had fallen down. And they don't want to sign because of those things. So first of all, do they have a contractual leg to stand on? And secondly, even if they have a contractual leg to stand on, how do you handle it? And if you don't volunteer, I'm just going to pick on people. Yes, Jill, unmute.
Well, so just to clarify, so coming from my own experience and from California, we always do that final walkthrough. The final walkthrough is so important to protect your buyer. So I'm not sure whose side is which in this situation, but
we have the buyers.
Okay, so, well, I definitely think you do have a leg to stand on. That's why we do the final walkthrough.
Okay. And our contract basically says that the seller will deliver the home in the same condition as when we wrote the offer. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now it gets a little dicier, right? What is actually included and what is not included?
Was the spot on the carpet concealed?
Oh, Randy, I'm so glad you're on the call. According to the agent, not so much. There wasn't a rug over it. There wasn't a couch over it. All right. And sorry, this is a good point because I've dealt with several of these spot issues over the years with agents. It says in the contract in section 10.2, you're buying the property as is, and then it makes reference back to section 8, which means you have due diligence, do all the tests that you deem necessary to make sure the property is acceptable. And then the third part of that, the third leg of that stool is the seller is responsible to disclose anything that is not readily discoverable. So in your experience as practitioners, do you typically have the ability, the right to come in as part of your inspections and move everybody's furniture, move beds, couches, and make sure the carpets? No. So if there was a couch over it, then the seller would have an obligation to disclose that. But in this case, doesn't appear to be the case. So let's deal with that one. Does the buyer have a leg to stand on? Dan says yes.
Well, it's assuming that it was covered.
It was not covered.
Oh.
I was just saying, typically, if it is, you would have a case. But in this case, it wasn't covered. They just didn't look really closely. Yeah, go ahead, Jill. You don't have to raise your hand. This is a very forward group. Just
sorry.
Blurt it out.
Well, the house has to be in that same condition to which the buyers initially saw it. And so they did the visual, they did the walkthrough, the agent hopefully did the visual inspection as well. And so if it was not noted then by either agent, then in addition to the buyer not seeing it, then that's something new and the seller should fix it, in my opinion. And then secondly, anything of removing of the wall, those are fixtures if it's bolted. So if they've removed something, that's a leg to stand on.
Okay,
So,
let's take the spot first.
okay.
I'm going to take a contrary opinion with you that doesn't mean I'm right, Jill. If there was nothing covering it, so right, we can go back to the photos that were taken on the listing and see that there wasn't a couch or a rug covering it. And as a result, they didn't, when they did their walkthrough, they just didn't look closely enough. I don't know if it's a super subtle stain or if it's a more blatant stain. And then there's also the case of, well, did the stain happen during the time we were under contract? Pretty dang hard to prove, right? Unless you have a photo of that area where you can see there is no stain and now there is a stain. My point is, this is a tough one, right? And rather than, and this is what I was telling the agent on these 3 issues, was hopefully we are good enough practitioners to be solution providers, not the contract says, and therefore thou shalt. As soon as you start doing that, whether you see what I'm doing with my hand here, as soon as you start doing that verbally or otherwise, human nature, I have found over 23 years of doing this, is pretty much people are going to get entrenched really fast. And let me just take a go up 30,000 foot view. Okay, a carpet stain, most carpet stains, if you get a good carpet company, can remove a stain unless it's something crazy, right? A little fixture over a toilet seat, not a huge deal. And frankly, I wish I had a photo of it to show you. I'm like, really, it looks like something from the 70s. I'd be glad it's gone. And then the third one is the air duct that has fallen down. Anybody who's ever done this, you don't have to be a super handyman. A pipe clamp, the big round ones with a screw that just kind of shrinks it as you do. A 30-cent pipe clamp at the hardware store and reconnect it, and we're done. So I don't know, call me crazy. We're supposed to be, yes, we need to let our clients know what their contractual rights are, but we should also be the pros enough to be like, hey, listen, I think it's, Jill, if you were my client, I'd be like, Jill, I totally get it. And you know what? In an ideal world, they should have left things a certain way, but maybe I can reach out to them and see if they'll give us a little bit of a credit for the stain and for the missing thing over the toilet. And even if they don't, right? And there's intention with how I say that, right? Because I'm setting them up for the case that they won't, that the seller won't. Even if they don't, rather than make a ruckus about it with the seller and sour a relationship, because you never know if you're gonna have to call them and say, hey, where was the sprinkler line? Where was the, right? You want to keep that relationship if you can. Let's see if they'll do a credit. And if not, you know what? I got a handyman, I got a carpet guy or what, and let's get that done. And be a solution provider. That's not us rolling over and not sticking to the contract, because right now in the situation this morning, she's dealing with her client and saying, yeah, if they don't do that, we're not going to close and we'll just take them to court. I'm just like,
Matt,
one final comment, Randy, and then I'll get to you. When I hear a client say, we'll just take them to court, you know what that means to me? They've never been to court. They've never gone through the process, even if it's small claims court, because it is just a royal pain in the butt, right? Go ahead, Randy.
well, I've only been in this industry for a short while, but one of the first things
Yeah,
I ever
that's
learned
funny,
was,
Randy.
one of the first things I learned was, is it worth it to save the deal? And if it's like a $500 ticket, I'll pay it. And not only will it's the difference between getting a paycheck and not getting a paycheck, $500 or, whatever that number is, and a little bit of time. How much time have we put into searching for homes or listing the home or selling the home? Let's get to the finish line, pay that, whatever that is. And not only can you get to the finish line, put something in the bank, but you look good to your client. And the other agent goes, oh my goodness, why can't I be more like, hopefully they're thinking, I should have thought that, maybe, because you're the guy who's come across or the gal who's come across with the flag saying, let's fix this, let's get this done, let's take care of this, and everybody looks good, and you were the facilitator of that.
Randy, thank you. I really like that. Daryl, do you have a comment?
Yeah, these are so trivial. The knee-jerk reaction for me is, okay, why are they really canceling? Is this just an excuse to try to get out of the deal? Did interest rates go up? Do they have
Now they
other
really
problem?
want the house, for the record.
Okay,
It's just sometimes, and this is the final point, and I want to wrap this up so I get onto our content, but sometimes, you know, especially when we know our contracts, this is my caution to you. You do need to explain to them the contract. That is part of your job to have an understanding of the contract. But just because you can do it in a contract or enforce it or attempt to enforce it in a contract does not mean it is the best path, right? Because here's the thing. This is what a lot of agents don't understand. Just because on the one hand, you're saying, yeah, we could totally take them to court. If they go that route or some version of it, imagine the amount of angst and frustration and all the things in that process. And even if they prevail, who's going to look bad? You are, directly or indirectly. They're going to be like, I can't believe my agent, and it's not rational. I can't believe my agent wasn't a good agent and didn't keep me away from all of this headache, angst, and grief. They're not going to sit there like, whoo, I won. I got the toilet fixture. You know, you get the point. So just remember this, even though we're covering contracts and negotiate, let's emphasize on the negotiation and by extension solutions, right? And I love Randy's point. At the end of the day, yeah, nobody likes to cough up a couple $100 or $300 or whatever the case may be. But if it gets the deal across the finish line first, so you get a commission check, that's nice. And if it shows your client, who hopefully you're going to work in your sphere for years to come with their brothers, sisters, kids, grandparents, that is money well spent if they come away going, my agent is a rock star. There were some problems. They just stepped up and took care of it so we could get our house and be on our way. How much money do we spend on a Zillow lead? How much money do we spend on marketing materials? This is money well spent. Consider it part of your marketing plan. Okay. Fair enough. All right. So today, I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to start sharing my screen here. I wanted to talk about something that gets batted around all the time, and we can't make it go away, but it's also one of the stupidest things we have to deal with. Anybody know what I'm talking about? And if you say me, so help me, I'm going to just delete you off the call. Susan, go ahead. I can't hear you, by the way.
I was just saying goodbye. No.
Oh,
You were gonna
oh, okay,
delete me.
okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Okay, so I did a search. In fact, I'm going to bring up my PDF here and maybe drag it over to this screen. You think that'd be an easy function, right? Okay, there we go. So I did a search in the MLS just for an example of what we're going to be talking about today. And it's an area, oop, getting some feedback. It's an area down in South Utah County, Woodland Hills, and I used it because there wouldn't be a ton of solds, right? But it demonstrates the point. So let me see if I can bring back up my MLS here. So if I come back here, oh, well, that kind of backfired. Let me go to this one. If I view these results, right? I just searched for anything that sold in Woodland Hills in the past 12 months, and it came up with 15 properties, right? Single family. And, you know, our MLS is kind of great. You can search on different things, on the list price, the sold price, and you can do it on price per square foot. This is the stupidest thing ever. Well, that's a big hurdle. There's a lot of stuff that could qualify for that. So it's at least really stupid. And you can see in the same area, and you can see the sales prices over here, right? You're talking some of the higher end properties, $750,000 up to, 2.5 million, something like that. And the price per square foot, which I sorted, can you guys all see this okay? All right, we got one head. Yes. All right, awesome. I'll zoom in just a titch more. But you can see when I sort on price per square foot, the lowest, $80 a square foot, all the way down to $360 a square foot. So why? Why is there such a discrepancy on square footage?
age, condition. Sometimes there's more useful square footage than others. Square
Okay.
footage.
Missing some big ticket items, Dan. I expect more from you as a former appraiser.
Land
Lot
is included.
Lot size.
Lot
Land.
size. Lot size is a big one. What else? Daryl, did you say something?
I said land, but also location.
Land, location. How do you quantify view? How do you quantify a legitimate view lot and what that's worth in price per square foot?
And finishes.
And finishes. I got one for you.
Garage.
How about, who said that?
I
Josh?
did. Don.
Don? Yeah, garages, right? 2-car garage, 4-car garage, 8-car garage. Jim Cannon has a property listed up Hobble Creek that has a 34-car garage. That's not counted in square footage, by the way, right? So what I did is I just did a quick printout of these, and I wanted to just highlight a couple things. So as we're looking at these, this is the lowest one, again, in sorted order, lowest price per square footage. You look, oh my gosh, 9,300 square feet on 2 acres, and it's $80 a square. Here's something you'll see. It's not a direct correlation, but it tends to do this. The higher the square footage, it tends to be a lower price per square foot. Okay.
Because you're spreading the bathrooms and kitchens over more space.
That and just the economies of scale of producing a structure, right? I mean, I put a roof on, it doesn't go up on a 1-for-1 basis, right? For what's underneath. So just look at these real quick. We're not going to spend a lot of time here, but here's the lowest price one. 2 acres, $80 a square foot, 9,300, you know, the sales price of $750,000. We go to the next one and the price goes up. It's about the same price point, right? 811, 6,300, half the square footage, half the acreage, and it starts to go up on price. We go to the next one, 168, and you can see from the photo on the screen, you know, not terribly great, nothing fantastic about it. A little bit of a view, but 1.25 acres, 4,600 square feet. Again, square footage is going down, and it's 168. Now we get to this next one, if I remember correctly. So you look at the picture, it looks kind of like a standard front, but you know, sold for 1.1, 176 a square, 3/4 of an acre, 6,500 square feet. Hey, at least it's got a 3-car garage. I think it's the next one. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, 8-car garage, $180 a square foot, and yet the price was over $1 million, right? And we can keep going on. You know, you kind of get the idea. We're $182 a square, 5,000 square feet. I'm going to go down further pretty fast, get kind of the high end to demonstrate a point. Okay, I actually know this property, $258 a square foot, 5,700 square feet on a little less than a half an acre. And it's a 3-car garage. Why? Why is it so high compared to the others? 168, 180 a square foot versus almost 260.
The age?
Yeah, pretty dang new, right? Is it contemporary colors, style, good angles, you know, lots of gables? And here's the other thing you don't know. It's right below Summit Creek, which is a little bit in the south end of the valley. That's kind of a little bit of a prestigious area, if I'm going to use a word. It's a gated community, but these guys are just outside of it, which also adds to the appeal because you don't have a $250 a month HOA fee. So that's kind of nice. And the fit and finish, somebody said that earlier. If you take a tour of this photo, super nice house. I told my wife, I'm like, why didn't you work up there? Why didn't you make an offer on that? She says, because you wouldn't pay. I'm like, well, you're right. And then I'm going to use this one. My wife actually just sold this one a little while ago. And look at this, 5,000 square feet, 1/3 of an acre, $291 a square foot. Oh, it's in Summit Creek, in the gated community. It has a pool, it has a clubhouse. It's got pickleball courts and tennis courts being built. It's up on the hill, and it's got ridiculous views, right? So are you guys getting the point I'm driving at here? I just I have a hard time when we talk about price per square foot, as you talk to other agents, and even more importantly, you get clients who say, well, that's really high price per square foot, or that's a good deal, it's low price per square foot. Are you guys prepared as practitioners to walk them through the discussion of not hanging their hat on price per square foot? Or have you not, honest moment here, or have you not thought about it? If you haven't thought about it too much, just give me a little raise of the hand. You're all liars. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for the moment of honesty. My experience with agents is we don't pay attention to that so much, and we kind of we hope that our clients are rational with it and make sense of it. Is that really their job, or did they hire us to bring knowledge and experience and intelligence to the equation? Here's another one. None of those that I showed you had this as an example. What if there's a pool? What if there's a pool on the property? How does that factor into price per square foot?
Sometimes it doesn't
everything
matter.
else, it all-
Wait,
Go
say
ahead,
that
Randy.
again, Randy?
I was just going to say a lot of people really don't want it because it's only a 6-month situation. Then they got to have service or winterizing, summerizing. So a pool may not matter. That's an individual taste.
Oh, somebody like Jill moves in from California. It's a big deal. You got to have a pool, right, Jill? Dan, what were you going to say?
Exactly what Randy said. Like everything else, it all depends.
It does. Is it, can we at least say somebody threw some big money to get a decent pool in? And what is the seller's perception? Is there value there?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
In the viewpoint of the seller.
Oh, sure, for sure.
Yeah, of course
sure.
there's value. We dropped 100 grand on that thing and it's wonderful. You know, we have reunions and all kinds of stuff, and they kind of attach the emotion to it. The flip side is, if you ever had a pool up here, and 6 months, if you don't want to have problems with your pool, you're probably going to want to keep it heated year round. Anybody paid the heating bill on a pool? Woohoo! Kind of fun. Here's one last one. On a property, well, we'll come to it in a minute, but what if they're up on the hillside, kind of in the snow line, right? Our valleys, we get snow, but if you were to venture a guess, Dan, how many times do you have to clear snow a year?
Oh man, so this is so funny. So I used to live in a southwest facing home in our driveway, and it was just a handful of times. And now I live north facing, and it felt last year like every single day. So again, it all depends, right? So for me in north facing, like I feel like I've already shoveled 3 or 4 times this year. So and we're not even into
half
to
an inch
winter technically.
Half an inch doesn't count, Dan.
Oh, man, it does when you're out there with a shovel.
You've probably seen this. As soon as you get up onto the foothills, right, the bench or higher, it's amazing how much more snow accumulates, right? And to your point, especially if you're not south or southwest facing, it's a big deal. So you'll find some houses up there that have plumbing under the driveway, right, with a boiler. Wow. Anybody know what the pricing is on that? Your boiler is going to be in the $30,000 to $50,000 range, plus the plumbing to get it under the driveway, right? And so that doesn't factor into price per square foot. So my point is, just be equipped. If you have a client that either upfront or in the process says something like, well, I don't want to be outside of, $150 a square foot. I hope you guys understand to educate them and walk them through that. Let me understand that. Let's take our focus off price per square foot for a minute and talk about what you really want. How many bedrooms do you need? How many baths? How many garages do you want to view? Do you not want to? All the things that are more important, right? Because price per square foot is just not going to typically line up with what they really want, right? Unless they're super highly analytical and are going to base the decision to buy a house on price per square foot, which I have yet to find somebody that is that fixated. So why?
Hey, Matt, I got a comment on price per foot.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Price per foot is so hard in a market like Woodland Hills, where there's so much diversity in asset type and age of construction and lot size and everything across the board, right? And so it's just super different, like streets up there, right?
Mhm.
If you were to go to a more, production built neighborhood, if you
Yep.
went to like an edge, neighborhood, like let's pull up Canyon Hills in Lehigh, right? And you were to find, similar models, that a price per foot there is probably, I wouldn't say okay, but it's a little better,
It's
right?
way tighter, isn't it?
Yeah, so you can certainly, use it as a better measure of value than in a really
apples
unique
to
neighborhood
apples.
like Woodland Hills. I would never rely on it. And like to your initial point, like you'll always find in any neighborhood, whether it's production or not, like the bigger homes will get less per foot than the smaller homes in the same neighborhoods. But man, in Woodland Hills, price per foot is just you kind of throw it out the window. It just
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Randy said a quick comment under his breath, and it was compare apples to apples. So even when you're talking about a 2-story versus a Rambler, not exactly a good measure, right? Your main floor square footage cost versus your second floor cost is significantly different. So I think we beat that to death. Let me share with you why I wanted to cover that today. And I'll just say this, let me share my screen again. And I'm going to drag this over here at the front end. I can find it. Let's see. This is, in case you guys don't know, on remaxofutah.com, in our training vault, we have all kinds of things. One of the things that we have there, so we have all the contract and negotiation Zoom calls recorded. We have the broker minute or 2 or 10, as Dan likes to say, also recorded. And there's also training on KV Core, which is helpful, but I concentrated on module 5 because this is a module that Dan Dixon helped us out with and did a fantastic job, which is going through Core Presents CMA, which is a fantastic program that you have access to, and how to use it effectively in your presentations of value or estimated value for your clients. Unfortunately, that's not what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to take you back to what we call old school and utilize the CMA program that has been in the MLS for a long time. And let me just bring it up here so you guys know what I'm talking about. What screen am I on? It's this one. Everybody seen this? Everybody familiar with this? Parker, are you familiar with that? Parker and I've known each other a long time, and I've given him tips on how to utilize this. Now, listen, I will just say this.
Yes, I like it. I like Cloud CMA a lot better, but
Okay,
this
so
is a really good platform.
Let's talk about the 3 really quickly. So you have this one that's on screen, which is the UtahRealEstate.com CMA. As a subscriber to UtahRealEstate.com, you also have access to Cloud CMA. And then because you're at Remax Associates and you have a ridiculous freebie called KV Core and all the tools that are attached to it, you have KV Core, Core Presents CMA. So you have 3 avenues, and I'm not here to tell you which one you need to do. I brought up that video so you can go and spend an hour and watch Dan with his magic. It's very, very helpful and instructive of how to use that tool, and there are some real strengths to it. I would say that the Cloud CMA has gotten better over the years, but if I were to paint with a broad brush, Cloud CMA is kind of a good looking presentation, but it doesn't have a lot of depth. Is that fair, Parker? Right?
Yeah. I have to, if you just go into Cloud CMA and you depend on Cloud CMA to pull up all of your comps, it's not going to do a very effective job.
Right.
Typically what I have to do is I have to go into the MLS. I have to go into something like this, input that data, then after it's compiled into Cloud CMA so that I can provide actual like numbers to my clients, like solid numbers, and then go through the CMA process. I like Cloud CMA because at the end of it, you have a link that you can text or email directly to your clients, and it's an interactive live link. So it just becomes more immersive for them. And of course, we're in a time and age where that is important to people.
Yeah. And just a follow on, Dan, I'm sure is thinking the same thing when you said that. Core Presents allows you to do the same thing, to send a link that is immersive and can be shared. And I love the fact that you brought up kind of the data. In fact, Molly, who is one of the key trainers for our MLS, when she talks about Cloud CMA, she talks about going in here first and finding your good comps and then pumping it into Cloud CMA, because that's one of the deficiencies. It will take two stories and ramblers and mix them together. That's not a good thing on a market analysis. So let's
Hey, can I add
surrender
something to
that.
Parker's
It's a very
comment?
professional presentation, but you kind of got to put the data into it. Randy, comment?
So I was going to say, like Parker, I do the same thing. I just gather all the data from the MLS, and the presentation is so nice with Cloud CMA. And then it gives you the opportunity also to present a range, because you don't know that house. They think they know what the value is, but if you provide a range, then you can say, well, here's kind of a range, and it gives you a window to say, best case scenario, your house could be worth this. If there's some material defects or some things that we need to work on, or you want to sell it as is, it might be worth this. And that gives them an idea of like, oh, so you're actually thinking, what could we do to improve the house to get the most out of it? I like that part about Cloud CMA. You can present a range.
Yeah. And you know what? That's the sign of a pro. The minute you come out and say, this is exactly, you don't even have appraisers do that, right? Appraisers come out and give you a value, but in most of our scenarios, hopefully Dan can back this up, it's saying it's worth at least this, right? It's not saying that is the value, right? We send over via the lender a purchase contract that says, is the house worth X, right? And their job is to go and say, it is worth X, but
Amen.
it doesn't say that that is the ultimate value of it. Go ahead, Parker.
Just tagging on with what Randy said about that price range, it really helps, especially when you're sitting down at a listing, to look at that price range. And what it allows you to do is say, this is what I think we can get you at the top of the market. This is what I think the most likely price range is going to be. This is what I think, if there was a fire sale. But the price range that Randy's talking about really allows you to draft that for your clients and illustrate it in such a way that you kind of hedge your bets in some ways. So, and you do it in a very professional manner. So I like that too, Randy.
Okay, so let's surrender this. This is not just, and I know nobody's doing this, but I want to make sure you understand. I'm not advocating one over the other of the three. They all serve a purpose. Today's focus is how I think this tool can help you. I'm not necessarily advocating that this is the best tool to put in front of your client, right? But if I took a property that my wife has listed, by the way, if anybody wants to sell this property, she would really appreciate it. It's spectacular. I may or may not.
Matt just wanted to point out his sugar mama.
That's right. I just pointing out that it's really kind of spectacular and the views are ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that was shameful. All right. But I just used it because it's up in Woodland Hills and I used it as my subject property. But before I did, I went and did a search and said, show me all the homes that have sold in the past year up in Woodland Hills. And then I came in and said, now let's do a CMA, right? If you start with the CMA tool in the MLS, like here, and say, create a new, that's the hard way to do it. Go and do a search first, find your comps, stack them up, and then add your subject property. Okay, just so you know, that's the context that I did this on. And again, remember, some of these were $80 a square foot, some were $290 a square foot, right? And let me just give you one more historical thing. About, I don't know, a year and a half ago, the MLS finally got smart. Might have been somebody who sat on their board of directors and said, what are the adjustment values that we put in here and where the heck did they come from? Dan, where did those numbers come from in the past?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. They were just auto default. I think the funniest one to me is the default acreage one well, yours is obviously changed here, but it was 43. Yeah, there you go.
It was 43,560. Don't say anything. Who knows what that number is? It's the number of square feet in an acre.
Yeah.
Right.
And that number had been there for over 20 years. And I sat on the MLS board for 10 years. And we finally asked the question, where do these numbers come from? And nobody knew where the numbers came from. Nobody. They were just arbitrary, capricious numbers. I mean, if I could find an acre in Woodland Hills for $43,560, I'd buy every one I could find. Right?
Yeah.
In reality, you're more in the range, somewhere between 450, depending on the view. We've sold some up there at 700,000 for an acre. It depends, but I promise you, it's not $43,000. Okay. So what the MLS did is a year and a half ago, they came in and they wiped out all the values. They just left zeros because they're not realtors and they're not appraisers. And so they said, hey, it's your job to put those values in, which threw people for a loop. It's like, well, where do I come up with these numbers? And my counsel to people, and I'm going to give you the very condensed version, there's a lot more detail to this, was, when was the last time you spent some time with a builder? I mean, like sitting down with a builder's agent, you say, how much does it cost to add an additional third car garage? How much does it cost to finish the basement? How much does it cost to add a bathroom? And do that with 2 or 3 builders. And pretty soon you're going to start to see some commonality on the values, right? The most important thing, though, on this is whether I have zeros there or I have adjustment values, just be consistent. And it's ironic, I have 2 appraiser buddies that I rode bikes with for a decade, and we'd have these discussions all the time about appraisals, and they have a totally, Dan, you can vouch for this, they have a totally different methodology for coming up with value than we do. But ironically, we would land somewhere close in the same ballpark. It was pretty comical if you did a solid CMA. So the point is, whatever values you choose, make sure that you're consistent. Don't apply one value to some of the comps and some of the other, because that jacks everything up. To Randy's point, he said earlier, make sure you're doing apples to apples. And everything I'm going to say from this point on is going to be pretty fast and with a broad brush, and there are exceptions, and there's a more refined approach, but I think you'll get the idea. So if you're in a decent house, right, how much is a bedroom? There's no plumbing. You got some electrical outlets, and you have a closet, and it's sheetrock.
6 or 7.
Huh?
6 or 7.
I think, you could be 5. It depends. How big is the room?
Right.
If it's your typical cookie cutter home with a 10-foot by 11-foot secondary bedroom, okay, that's not so much.
True.
I mean, it's like a glorified closet. My dad was a builder. I've done a lot of sheetrock and all this stuff over the years. It's not really hard to do. Okay. But if you're in a bigger home where you've got, a 16 by 18-foot bedroom, well, there's substantially more that goes into that as far as just sheer square footage, wall, ceiling, etc. So you'll be able to kind of gauge that. A bathroom, wow, this could change dramatically. It depends, right? My point is, I have up here, just so you know, I created 3 different definitions: low grade, mid grade, high grade. I can't get more. I'd have 20 different definitions if I was trying to cover everything, or 200 definitions if I was trying to cover everything that is out there. But just as a good starting point, kind of get your values with your Fieldstone home builders versus your Arrive home builders versus your more custom builders, and use those values for low, mid, and high. I'm not trying to ding anybody, but I think that's fair to say, right? Fieldstone in a development typically has 2 or 3 plans, and they do it over and over again with just some slight changes to elevation, right? Anyway, once you do that, come in, but here's some important things that I've found the agents really neglect. And this is why I brought up price per square foot. This is where it can be valuable. If you've gone through, remember my list of 15 properties, I can find some commonality, right? If my house that I'm creating a value for was more like the one my wife sold, which was kind of the top of the heap, versus something that's not in a exclusive neighborhood, is not gated, does not have a great view, and is 10 to 15 years old, well, I need to make sure that I make some adjustments for that. And you'll find kind of a sweet spot for square footage, right? Make sure it's not skewed with an 8-car garage and things like that. But if you just do a basic level of screening, you'll come up with 5, 6, 7 properties that'll kind of give you a ballpark idea of what the price per square foot is going to go for in that area. And that's where you want to make sure you drop it in here, right? As you look on the MLS, how many of you with any regularity look at price per square foot? Come on, I do. Okay. So it's funny, if you look up in Alpine, price per square foot is going to be different than in Payson. Fair enough. That's a fair statement. If you're in the Salt Lake Valley, east side of I-15 versus west side of I-15, Randy, is there a difference in value? We'll take that as a yes.
Sorry, but yes, there's going to be a difference.
Yeah, there will be a difference. Thank you, Randy.
And
okay.
You said Alpine, so let me just say something real quick. There is a difference in square foot in Alpine depending upon new builds, or because Alpine, for instance, that's an old city, and
yep.
there will be a difference in price per square foot. And many shoppers that have the money that they want to shop in Alpine are looking for high-end fixtures and finishes as well. And if that particular home hasn't gone through its cyclic change and updated all their hardware, their cupboards, their fixtures, their bathrooms, you're not going to get the price per square foot that you will on a brand new. Even if you have all landscaped, you're just not going to get the same price per square foot as a brand new home up there.
Such a great point, Randy, because you could have an old house that has been completely renovated and it should be right up there with the new ones, right? You guys, here's the point I'm driving home. We as agents, and I'm talking a bigger group, like our profession, we want a click the button function, right? We want to be like, I just want to click a button, just give me a value. Well, if that's what our job was, then there'd be no need for us. And there would be, I don't know, there'd be maybe 24,000 real estate agents in the state of Utah. Oh, wait a minute, there are. But the reason why 20% of the agents do 80% of the business, and that's not a joke, that's like legit, is because the 20% understand how important good data is. So one of the points I'm trying to make to you today is, even though it takes a little more time, get good at this part of the craft. It's what really does set you apart. If I can go into Jill as my prospect and say, Jill, most agents are going to use, and I'm going to ding on Parker's Select, they're going to use Cloud CMA and just kind of spit out a number. I don't think that's fair for you as my client. Here's what I do. I actually have 3 different tools. I use this one as a starting point because it allows me to get very granular, specific to your property. And I'm going to show you some of the adjustments I did, blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden you have started to set yourself apart from your competition. Is that fair? Dan, go ahead.
I love what you've done here. You've gotten really specific about this property and what makes it unique and what the area wants, right? Like your area here, they value fireplaces because you're up in the mountains, right? It values RV parking. It values, garage, and so you put garage at 20K, right? You've gone through and you didn't throw it in the hopper at default values. You put it in the hopper with really thoughtful adjustments, throughout the whole list here. And I even like your unicorns, line item, right? And why is that? Because, when you're dealing with properties that are a couple $1 million, there is something that's really unique to every one of these homes. And like, does this have that unique feature? And like, it's a kind of, I don't know what it is. Is it a 40-foot, water feature in the backyard that makes it unique, right? Well, that's worth something, right? So I really like how you did this, and it's really thoughtful. And, everyone can do this for all of the homes they're looking at, is go through, light item it out and say, okay, is this, I don't mean to ding any house, but is it kind of more of a production build, kind of a little bit more generic? Is there what will people pay for this particular area? And I think, we can get more thoughtful about our valuation. So I like what you've done here.
Thanks. And all of these items down here, landscaping on down, those are things I added, right? They're not part of the default package. So you can add another adjustment factor. So I'm just going to pull this up on screen so you can show, hey, is there a detached barn? I could add that, right? I can go through any number of things, or I can create a custom factor. Like, I don't know, is there a pool? I can add that, right? So just know it's more flexible than most people think. You can add those factors down here and they will show up here on your list. And so I just put unicorns there to remind me when I'm doing this, is there something unique about this property? And in this case, my unicorn is a heated driveway, a heated paver driveway with a boiler. It really should be more along the lines of, right? And here's the crazy thing. When you start doing this, you will start to see your adjustment factors. And all of a sudden, you know, something that sold for 750,000 with all the adjustments starts being a 467 comp, right? And so I'm going to strongly look at this. I'm going to go pop up the listing and look in more detail on that one, blah, 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 see what the differences are. And I may come up and say, that's just not a good comp. And I'm going to click remove. And it's gone, right? And it changes my value, right? So I do all the heavy lifting here by finding all the comps that could be a potential. Then I put good values in here specific to my property because I'm trying to adjust them. I'm the apple. I need to make my comps apples as well. That's why we make the adjustment factors. And then I look across the bottom line. And if I see something that's way too high or way too low, I'm going to go look at its listing specifically to see if there's something that is making a difference. So for instance, an 8-car garage. Yeah, as long as we can make the adjustment and it's reasonable, it doesn't skew the data, I can leave it in, right? And as I slide across, you can see my adjusted values, right? I may come back and look at that 1.3. I also might look at something that, you know, is 3 million. And just, I want to, in my practice as an agent, I always wanted to have between 5 to 8 good comps, right? 5 is enough to be statistically significant. And 8, frankly, if you get beyond that, it just kind of gets redundant. So that's just,
Hey, Matt,
that's me. Yeah, go ahead.
can we talk about comps in a low inventory market? They become increasingly difficult to find, right?
Sure. Let's.
So can we talk about how you
Yeah.
make adjustments for that?
Yeah, hold that thought for a second, because I just want to wrap this up in the greater context of the CMAs, and then we'll talk about that one. But as you guys look at this, if I look at the comps, I hope everybody understands how this works, right? There's 4 bedrooms on this comp. My house has 6, so we need to add 2 bedrooms. That's why we add $12,000 to their ultimate price, right? It's showing 1.9, but their sales price was 770,000. So there were a lot of things added. I had to add, you know, bathrooms. They have 1 full bath and I've got 6, right? And at 6,000 per, that's a $30,000 adjustment. You get the idea, right? And that helps us get apples to apples so that we can potentially use it as a comp. So coming back up to the 30,000 foot view, the reason why I still like this archaic system that's been around forever is if you've spent enough time to go make some adjustments, I will use this and these comps either to create a CMA within this tool, or use it to feed Cloud CMA, or to also use it to fact check myself against Core Presents in KV Core, right? And just one last thing. Let's say I've done all the work on here and I'm happy with the value and I think it's reasonable. This is where it's quote unquote archaic. It's not as pretty, it's not as presentable, it doesn't have an active link that you get immersed in. But to the whole point of having a range, if you come in here and say, I'm going to create that CMA report, you get to check the things that are in there. So I'm going to say, yeah, I want a cover sheet. And I may do the comparison report, which is the sheet that we were just on, and a summary analysis. But just so you know, the whole range, there's a reason why there's all these editing tools across the top, because I can take this cover page and I can say it's prepared for, you know, John Doe, shift home, center it, right? And let's grow the font or whatever the case may be. You get the idea. I can bold it, I can make it, and then I'm going to put down below suggested price range. Same thing that Cloud CMA does, same thing that Core Presents does. I don't want to stick to an exact number, right? I want to say if the value came in at 1.9 million, I'm going to say, you know what, depending on your motivation, my recommendation is we price it at, you know, 2,099,000 or whatever the case may be, down to 1.8 million, depending on how fast you need to be out of the house, because it's not the greatest market and you may need to motivate people. Does this make sense, you guys? Do you understand? I just want to make sure you understand the difference in the three tools. This one is really the most intensive data wise, and I think you can get more granular than this with others. Not to say the others aren't good and don't have value. Dan, go ahead.
You can also insert this into your Core Presents presentation as a slide. So on the homepage of Core Presents at the top right, you can customize your own presentation and you can add a slide. And it takes a few extra clicks, but it's really not that hard. So if you like the data the way it's presented here, then you can just pull this over in a couple, PDFs. Maybe don't include the cover sheet, and then you can, have this as a couple pages in your slideshow. One of the things I like about Core Presents is it says how good you are, right? And I think we don't brag about ourselves enough. And so, I think this is the professional tables here, right? And so the way if we can walk people through the professional data and then do it in a really good looking way, I think that really is the cherry on top.
Such a good point. I think the value of having this, even if you just created a slide in your Core Presents, the fact that they can see that there's an analysis being done, they can see adjustments. Now, listen, they may come in and go, what do you mean? My garage is worth X or whatever. Okay. I've found in my experience, very few people do that. They look at this and be like, oh yeah, Barton's thorough. I mean, he's taking into account all the features of my home and he's making adjustments, and he's explained to me how they adjust the comp so that we come at a solid value, because that's kind of what appraisers are going to do. That's all I want them to know. I want them to know I'm thorough and I'm really immersed in the data. And just by seeing the sheet, I promise you, I'm going to spitball a number here. 95% of them are not going to dig into the numbers, because once they do, it's going to give them a headache, but it does reassure them that you're very thorough, and that does have value. Okay, so we just have 4 minutes left. Parker, I wanted to address your question. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you guys better.
While you're doing that, and in those 3 minutes, we're going to be going live with our Agent Mastery here in just a minute. So
that's right.
People want to jump onto that, that'd be fantastic.
Dan and Aaron Mailer are doing the mastery class, which is fantastic. Hear wonderful things about that. Parker, your question was, restate it real quickly for me.
So I was just curious to know how you comps in a down inventory market.
Yep. So if there's not a lot of sales, and right, you and I go back to the 2012 trough of a very, sometimes the problem wasn't enough inventory, it was too much, but
yeah, there was too much inventory.
Yeah, but there's been different times where there hasn't been a lot of inventory, or you could be out in, I don't know, freaking Garden City or some remote place and there's just not a lot of good comps. Think like an appraiser, right? And Dan can vouch for this. He may have had to jump off to get start prepping for his call, but appraisers typically have, and I'm painting in with a broad brush, they have requirements from whoever's hiring them or whoever's going to fund the loan. I need to be within a circumference of a mile with a subject property. That's the starting point. But if there's low inventory, as long as they document it, they can go out to a similar property in an adjoining city or something like that. But again, they're going to want to see rambler to rambler, 2-story to 2-story, right? Don't go, well, there's not enough inventory, so I'm going to compare a 2-story that's completely finished with my rambler that has an unfinished basement. So as you work through these CMAs, and specifically the one I just showed, you pretty rapidly start to understand what you can use that stretch the geographical boundaries, as long as it's a similar property in a similar community with similar features, then you can use it. So I live in Springville, and if you go from west to east, it's kind of a funnel, right? It goes very broad, close to I-15, and towards the mouth of Hobble Creek Canyon, it narrows down. We pull comps from Mapleton all the time, right, along the foothills and the bench, because it's a very similar area to where we live. So just use that as kind of a frame of reference. You can stretch geographically as long as you're making sure you're doing apples to apples. Okay. Guys, thanks for your time. I want to wrap up on time. So if you can make it over to Dan and Aaron's call, and that'll be time well spent. But thanks for being on the call, and I hope you have a highly productive week.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, see you guys.
Thanks, Matt.